Ever wonder what it takes for a whiskey to be labeled as bourbon? Well, I'm going to tell you. I'm Ryan from With or Without Whiskey, and this is Whiskey Specs. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Whiskey Specs, the show where I give you the definitions, qualifications, and specifications of your favorite whiskey categories. I'm Ryan from With or Without Whiskey, and today we will be covering bourbon. If you guys are bourbon fans, or whiskey fans in general, do yourselves a favor and hit the subscribe button down below. On May 4th, 1964, the U.S. Congress recognized bourbon whiskey as a distinctive product of the United States. The federal standards of identity for distilled spirits states bourbon must meet these requirements. Only whiskey produced in the United States can be called bourbon. Bourbon must be made from a grain mixture of at least 51% corn. The other 49% can be made up of any other type of cereal grain. So, a whiskey like Weller that has a secondary grain of wheat and a whiskey like Old Grandad that has a secondary grain of rye are both legally considered bourbon because at least 51% of their mash is corn. Must be distilled to no more than 160 proof or 80% ABV. It must be aged in new, charred oak barrels. There is no legal age requirement for a whiskey to be called bourbon, only that it must be aged in new charred oak barrels. So, a whiskey can be put into a new charred oak barrel and then immediately taken out and still legally be called bourbon. The distilled spirit may not be introduced to the barrel at a higher proof than 125 or 62.5% ABV. Nothing can be added to the whiskey except for water. So, a finished whiskey cannot legally be called bourbon. Angel's Envy, for instance, legally must be referred to as Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey finished in port wine barrels. If a whiskey meets all of these qualifications, it can legally be called bourbon. Well, that does it for today's episode of Whiskey Specs. If you enjoyed the episode and you learned something new, do me a favor and hit the subscribe button down below. Also give me a like and hit the bell notification. That way you guys get informed every time I drop a new video. Also, leave me a comment. Let me know. Are you guys bourbon drinkers or do you prefer something like Scotch or Irish whiskey? And if you have any ideas for new topics on Whiskey Specs, please leave them in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. Until next time, stay safe, guys. Take care.